primer level is to become more acquainted or better acquainted with him, alayhi salatu wasalam, and some of the important aspects of his life, family, offspring, important events, etc. And so, essentially, because the sessions are short, the idea is that when you walk away, you'll have one or two things that you should try and commit to memory if you haven't done so already. So our Imam al-Hafidh Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi rahimahullah ta'ala, before actually getting into the short biography of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, there has been reported the reasoning behind authoring this work, which I find quite amazing, if you will. And this is on page 15, if you have the book with you. It says, Abdul Karim ibn Abdul Nur ibn Munir al-Halabi said, some scholars told me that the reason behind the compilation of this book by al-Hafidh Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi was that once the author went out with some of his friends until they came to a monastery. Okay, the monastery is where the monks reside. And typically these are Christian monks. Al-Hafidh Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi sat back by the bank of the river that was nearby while a friend went directly to knock on the monastery gate. A monk came out and asked him, "What's your religion?" And so the man replied, "Islam." The monk then asked, "Who do you follow?" He answered, "Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." The monk requested of him to tell him about his lineage and his characteristics. He says, "Who do you follow?" He says, "Muhammad." He says, "Well, tell me about him, his lineage, and what he's like." And since the friend of al-Hafidh, this particular gentleman, Hafidh Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, he did not have the knowledge, he did not have the basic knowledge to say, well, this is his lineage, these are his characteristics. He kept silent, and the monk refused to entertain them as guests. And then the friend returned to al-Hafidh Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi and explained to him what had happened. And so he proceeded to give him some information about the subject. The friend then returned to the monk and answered his previous request. The monk then said, "This information is not from you. This information came from the sheikh who is sitting by the river on the bank." The monk had seen the sheikh and was amazed by him. He came to al-Hafidh Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, who mentioned to him some of the characteristics and miracles of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after which he converted to Islam and became a good Muslim, the monk. So this was, as reported by some, the purpose of Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi's authoring of this short text is so that every Muslim would have the bare essentials required to be able to speak about your prophet. If someone were to ask you, who is he and where does he come from? What has he done and what is he about? If you have some of this information committed to memory, such a question would not be a challenge when asked. The Imam and renowned scholar al-Hafidh Abu Muhammad Abdul Ghani ibn Abdul Wahid al-Maqdisi, may Allah be pleased with him, he says, "Praises to Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the maker of light and darkness, the one who will gather the people toward the final judgment, when the doers of good will be successful and the doers of evil will be the losers. I testify there is no deity worthy of worship except the Almighty Allah, who has no partners, a testimony that will bring happiness to its faithful on the day of judgment, and prayers and peace be upon our Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, and his companions." So the author, he says, as a brief overview, this book, the descriptions of the life of the characteristics of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that every one of us should familiarize ourselves with. And he begins with the lineage, right? The lineage of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Because our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam comes from the best of lineages. So he begins, he says, he is Abu al-Qasim, and that is his kunya, if you will, like Abu Ibrahim or Abu Muhammad. Abu al-Qasim after his son's name, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, ibn Abdul Muttalib, ibn Hashim, ibn Abdi Manaf, ibn Qusay, ibn Kilab, ibn Murrah, ibn Ka'ab, ibn Lu'ay, ibn Ghalib, ibn Fihr, ibn Malik, ibn Nadar, ibn Kinana, ibn Khuzaymah, ibn Mudrika, ibn Ilyas, ibn Mudar, ibn Nizar, ibn Ma'ad, ibn Adnan. So there you have a number of names. These are his forefathers. So up to this point, when you get to Adnan, this particular narration, if you will, is agreed upon among the historians, the scholars of hadith, the religious scholars. They all agree that up into Adnan is agreed upon without question. Whatever comes after that, there are various narrations, and some of them are preserved or were presented by Ahlul Kitab, the Christians or the Jews. Al-Maqdisi, rahimahullah, here he actually continues the lineage all the way through to Adam alayhi salam, to the beginning of man. So as I mentioned, one of the great imams of Sirat, Muhammad ibn Ishaq al-Madani, he mentions that the lineage in some of his narrations, this particular lineage, and there's a consensus among the narrators that Adnan, while they differ about who came after him, that is authentic. And what should be understood here is that Adnan is from the offspring of Ismail. And Ismail, of course, is the son of Ibrahim. And therefore, the lineage of prophets from Ibrahim, which is where most of them came through, either through Ismail or through Ishaq, the majority came through Ishaq, whereas the Prophet ﷺ came through the lineage of Ismail. However, it was through the bloodline of Ibrahim, who is known as Abul Anbiya, the father of the prophets. So my advice would be that you memorize, not all of this necessarily, but you memorize a couple of names of his forefathers: Muhammad ibn Abdullah, ibn Abdul Muttalib, ibn Hashim. If you can do that, then you will certainly have some sound information to go on. So Muhammad is his name, obviously. Ibn Abdullah, that's his father's name. Ibn Abdul Muttalib. Now Abdul Muttalib is not the real name of his grandfather. Abdul Muttalib is a name that he was given as a nickname. His actual name is Shaybatul Hamd. That's the grandfather's real name, Shaybatul Hamd. And basically the story was that when Abdul Muttalib, or Shaybatul Hamd as the real name, was young, he was with his uncle al-Muttalib, who was older obviously, and he accompanied his uncle al-Muttalib. When they re-entered into Mecca, they found, the people there found that Muttalib now had this young boy, Shaybatul Hamd, behind him, and who had been outside, had now been tanned by the sun and dirty from the travel. They didn't recognize him as min al-aqarib. He wasn't from, it didn't look like he was from the relatives of al-Muttalib. And so they took him to be his servant or his slave, Abdul Muttalib. And so from that point on, he was called Abdul Muttalib. So if you can get to this point, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim, that would give you 4 names. So the Prophet ﷺ, his father, his grandfather, and great-grandfather. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim. So you work on that for this week, after this session, and then you can add to that in the weeks to come. And if you can get to Fihr ibn Malik, some of them say that this Fihr ibn Malik was Quraysh. He was known as Quraysh. And others said al-Nadr ibn Kinana, and this perhaps could be the stronger opinion. Al-Nadr ibn Kinana was known as Quraysh. Either one, the Prophet ﷺ came from the Quraysh, the Qurayshi tribe, after this particular forefather, Fihr ibn Malik or al-Nadr ibn Kinana, and essentially those are back to back. Fihr ibn Malik, ibn Nadr, ibn Kinana, in the chain of his lineage. Right? So we're going to work on 4 names: Muhammad ibn Abdullah, ibn Abdul Muttalib, ibn Hashim. Right? He was a Hashemite. After that, talks about his mother who was named Amina bint Wahab. Ibn Abd Manaf, Ibn Zuhra, Ibn Kilab, Ibn Murra, Ibn Ka'b, Ibn Lu'ay, Ibn Ghalib. A lot of those names are familiar because they are from the same lineage of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And so the lineage meets at some point because Amina herself was a notable of Quraysh, of the people of Mecca. She was notable. She was the best from them in regards to her lineage. She was the best of them in regards to her rearing, if you will, and also her manners and her etiquette. Because the Prophet ﷺ was the best of mankind, he came from the best lineage. And of course, her mother or his mother shared in some of that virtue. The next thing is the birth of the Prophet ﷺ. And Abdul Ghani, he mentions, Al-Hafidh Abdul Ghani, he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ was born in Mecca during the year of the elephant. The year of the elephant, of course, is an amazing story. It's a miraculous story that indicates the miraculous nature of the Prophet ﷺ, if you will, or it kind of not commemorates, but it kind of seals that year with an amazing event, because during that time the Arab, they did not have a unified calendar, and you can see by the way that they recall historical events by or historical dates by events that are associated with them. So they say he was born Am al-Fil, the year of the elephant, and the year of the elephant was when Abraha took the elephants and his army to destroy the Kaaba. And so in Mecca he was born in Rabi' al-Awwal, which is a month in the Islamic calendar. He says 2 nights having passed. And of course Yawm al-Ithnain. Yawm al-Ithnain is on a Monday. And the exact date, there are differing opinions among the great scholars of Islam. But one thing's for sure, and that is he was born on a Monday, and it wasn't Rabi' al-Awwal for the most part. So there you have a couple of things to remember after this session. The name of the Prophet ﷺ and his 3 fathers, if you will, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. You have his mother, Amina bint Wahab ibn Abdi Manaf. You can remember 3 of those. That would be a huge accomplishment. Amina bint Wahab ibn Abdi Manaf. And then, of course, you have his birthplace, which was in Mecca, and the time of his birth, which was the Am al-Fil, the year of the elephant, on a Monday in the month of Rabi' al-Awwal.